the first chapter of Totality and Infinity, which, well, let's see, the section is called The Same and the Other. This is an old philosophical distinction that begins right at the beginning of philosophy. So if you know anything about the origins of philosophy, especially with Plato, in Plato one of the main questions is, what is sameness? How do we even attain sameness? But what is sameness? How do we account for the fact that two things can be the same? And Plato comes up with a theory of ideas based on that phenomenon of sameness. The fact that two things are the same means that they share a common idea, a common form. So the theme of the same is a very old philosophical idea. And like any theme, when something is thematized in philosophy, it's usually done at the expense of its counter-theme. When you make something a theme, you have to push something else aside. So otherness, the concept of otherness, is demoted, is pushed down in order to highlight the theme of sameness. So in a sense, the whole trajectory of philosophy from Plato until, maybe not Levinas, but definitely until the era of Levinas. We read Buber together, so Buber could also count as part of the same movement. So from the origins of philosophy until, I guess, the 20th century, the theme of sameness dominates thought. And the Jewish thinkers, not only the Jewish thinkers, there are also Christian thinkers. For example, a contemporary of Martin Buber was Gabriel Marcel, a great Catholic thinker, who also talked about the I-thou relationship. Mm-hmm. And there were others as well, Franz Rosenzweig and so on. So Levinas belongs to this modern wave of not only Jewish, but definitely among Jewish thinkers, it's a very important theme. It's a very important theme, as I say, in Martin Buber and Franz Rosenzweig. Even in Hermann Cohen, although he wouldn't necessarily, he does use the words I and thou, but he doesn't thematize it quite as such. So in Levinas, as we've seen already, the other, the theme of the other, the concept of the other, takes center stage. And in section A of this division, I don't know what to call it, section 1, same the other, division A, metaphysics and transcendence, which for Levinas is basically are synonymous terms. I'll tell you in a second where the word metaphysics comes from historically. This subsection then is called the desire for the invisible. Again, we have to explain what all these words mean. Each one of them has a specific meaning for Levinas. He chooses words for their poetic import, their poetic flavor, but they have a technical, philosophical significance for him. So, beginning at the beginning, the true life is absent, but we are in the world. Metaphysics arises and is maintained in this alibi. Why, first of all, is this first line in quotes? This is actually a quote from a poem by Rambo, a very brilliant and precocious poet. Here, there's a picture of him as a boy. He was a very boyish kind of poet, also kind of nihilistic. And the text from which this is taken is not exactly a happy text. Rambo says, La vraie vie est absente. Nous ne sommes pas au monde. The true life is absent. That's what Levinas takes as his first line. We are not in the world, says Rambo. Levinas, then, as you can see in the second line, changes that. He says, but we are in the world. So whereas Rambo wants to say that the world basically is illusory and life in the fuller sense of the word, we don't really live in this world. We live elsewhere. Levinas says, no, actually, we are in this world. We do live in this world. And yet, at the same time, I mean, he is quoting Rambo to begin with, at the same time, true life is absent. Metaphysics arises and is maintained in this alibi. I just want to explain the word metaphysics. I don't know if you know this. The word originates with Aristotle, although, oddly enough, it doesn't come from Aristotle himself. Aristotle never used the word metaphysics. Aristotle used the word physics, not quite in the way that we would use it today. Physis in ancient Greek means nature. And so physics is the study of nature. The earliest Greek thinkers were actually called, by Aristotle, they were called the physikoi, those who study nature. Later on, I think it's Andronicus of Rhodes, who was the first great editor of Aristotle's corpus, so the works of Aristotle. So he arranged the works of Aristotle in a certain order, and he took all of his writings which belonged to physics and he put them in one place. And then those writings, which seemed to him to go beyond physics, he put in order after the books on physics, and he called them, I wrote it in here, put it up here in Greek letters. You can probably make up most of the Greek letters. This category he called ta meta ta physica biblia, which literally means that which is beyond or after the Biblia, the books of physics. Like we get Biblia as a bibliothèque and so on, Bible, it all comes from this word in French, library. So all the books which are on physics, those which come afterwards, were categorized by Andronicus as simply as those books which come after physics. Now, as a result of this categorization, a lot of the later Aristotelians, such as Thomas Aquinas, took this to be more than just a category, a librarian's category, but actually as a meaningful word. Meta, as you can see here, metaphysica, metaphysics, beyond physics. So they took this to mean not just books which are after physics, but after in the sense of beyond, higher than, more abstract than, more sublime than, more divine than. Aristotle's term was for this type of thinking was actually first philosophy, prote philosophia. The earliest, the most abstract and most basic type of thinking you can do before you move on to physics and before you move on to ethics and things like that. But the term metaphysics stuck, and it was given all kinds of nice interpretations. And today, it is it is a very standard and very important work in philosophy. Metaphysics means that which is, we could say it's basically religion, almost. It's very close to theology, although there is such a thing as metaphysics without theology. People do metaphysics without God. Although traditionally, that was unheard of. That was quite unthinkable. Even for Aristotle himself, metaphysics is the first or the highest object, the highest subject of metaphysics is God, understood in an Aristotelian sense. Now, Levinas takes this old traditional philosophical term, metaphysics, and he uses it in his own way of thinking with a bit of a twist. Metaphysics in Levinas doesn't quite mean what the tradition means by it. He means it he wants to use this word to characterize interhuman relationships. And not just interhuman, but definitely beginning with interhuman relationships. So metaphysique, beyond physics, is beyond, as we're going to see, it's beyond the totality of the physical realm, which is associated with the totality of the ego, of the self. That's when he speaks of metaphysical desire, as we'll see in a second. So again, the true life is absent. Let's bring this text back up. True life is absent, but we are in the world. Metaphysics arises and is maintained in this alibi. Why is it alibi? Alibi, of course, means that it has to justify itself, right? So metaphysics is, in a sense, is beyond this world. It's absent, and yet we are in the world. So the fact that we're still in the world, that gives metaphysics an alibi to carry out its business. It is turned toward the elsewhere, and the otherwise, and the other. For in the most general form it has assumed in the history of thought, it appears as a movement going forth from a world that is familiar to us, whatever be the yet unknown lands that bound it, or that it hides from view, from an at-home, chez soi in French, which we inhabit, toward an alien outside of itself, hors de soi, toward a yonder. So metaphysics is a movement from the at-home. Do you have this expression like that in Hungarian? And in French, we don't really have it in English. In English, chez soi means I'm at home. I'm at my place. I'm in Yiddish and in German, bei mir. Bei mir is like come to my house. Komm bei mir. Come to my place. We would say. So it's by me or by mine. Do you have something like that in Hungarian?
In translation, they also write here the French to make sure.
To make sure it's understood.
Good explanation. Ithon.
Ithon. From othon, right? Ithon, here at this house, right? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it has to do with habitation. Is kind of important in the concept of chez soi. It has to do with the home. I am at home. So. Here, of course, it's in a somewhat more abstract sense. Levinas is saying there is such a feeling of being at home, whatever that might mean, whether you are at home or you're at home in the cosmos, the world at large. So metaphysics is a movement from at-homeness, being at home, to a beyond, to something outside of at-homeness. In German, there's a very nice word, unheimlich. Unheimlich means uncanny, strange, but the raw etymological sense of the word is, as you can hear even in English, heim means home, and unheimlich means unhomey. It's not quite at home, but the simple, straightforward translation is strange or unusual, uncanny, weird. So for Levinas, the metaphysical is a movement again from this homey sense to this unhomey sense. The term of this movement and elsewhere or the other is called other in an eminent sense. So it's not, he's underscoring that he is going to use the word other, not in a simple sense of this is other than that, but in an eminent sense, in a primordial absolute sense. No journey, no change of climate, or of scenery could satisfy the desire bent toward it. The other, metaphysically desired, is not the other like the bread I eat, the land in which I dwell, the landscape I contemplate, like sometimes myself for myself, the I, the other. I can feed on these realities to a very great extent, and to a very great extent satisfy myself as though I had simply been lacking them. Their alterity is thereby reabsorbed into my own identity as a thinker or as a possessor. The metaphysical desire tends towards something else entirely, toward the absolutely other. So this movement towards otherness, as he underscores, is something towards an absolute otherness. This word alterity is a funny word, which I don't even know who invented it. I suspect it was philosophers, but alter, like alter ego, other than. So alterity is a catchphrase for otherness in general, philosophically understood. So the image here of eating bread, I think, is very useful to understanding what he's getting at. I eat bread. The bread that I eat is other than me. I have to go to the store, buy bread. But the fact that I can eat it, the whole purpose of my buying it is so that I do eat it. That fact shows that I can incorporate something that which is other than myself into myself. And there are many things like that in our life. There are many things that are other, initially are other, but then I bring them into myself. It could be a piece of bread, it could be a glass of the water in this glass. It could be anything I enjoy. It could be even people to some extent, especially when it's not a nice way to relate to other people, but psychologically we sometimes, we use people. We say, oh, she's just using him, he's just using her. What does that mean, that we're using somebody? Whether it's a friend or it's a sexual relationship or whatever. It means you're not taking the otherness of the other human being very seriously. you appreciate that they're other, but you don't care that much about their true self. You use them. You use them for your own benefit. That means you're not really escaping from yourself. You still are yourself. We actually call such people egoistic. You say, oh, he's such an egoist, such a selfish person. Even in relation to other people, this person, it's precisely in relationship to other people that we call a person selfish. In other words, sometimes we find ourselves in a relationship where it seems like the person is giving, and suddenly we realize, no, that person's not very giving at all. They're just using me. They're tricking me into thinking that this is a mutual relationship, but it's me mostly giving to them. And so we call this person an egoist, or even an egotist, which is slightly different in English. Egotist means somebody who's self-absorbed. So this type of gesture belongs to what Levinas calls totality. I'm creating a totality for myself, and I don't recognize otherness. I don't recognize the otherness of other people. And so in a sense, I treat people like bread. I eat them.
Like the agents in the Matrix?
Yes. Thank you for bringing up The Matrix, my favorite film of all time. The Matrix itself, I guess, in a sense. Yeah. The Matrix itself is using human beings as batteries. Right? So, why is it that The Matrix happens to be on my top 2 list of movies? It's because I believe it's a perush on Sefer Shmot. It's a commentary on the book of Exodus. And the book of Exodus is precisely, the beginning of the book of Exodus is precisely about the ultimate paradigm of using other people, namely slavery. When I have a slave, there is no greater expression of totality vis-a-vis another human being than slavery. I own another human being. I can do whatever I want with this human being. I can exploit them. I can even kill them without having serious repercussions. Right? When you kill a slave, it's not murder, assuming you belong to the regime of slave owning. So enslavement is this ultimate expression of totalization, totally encompassing another human being and not allowing for their otherness. And slavery takes many forms. There is classical slavery, like in the book of Shmot or in the Matrix, where a person is just a battery to be used. And then there are higher level emotional forms of enslavement. What, for example, Jean-Paul Sartre discusses in his book, Being and Nothingness, which he calls sadomasochism, which doesn't necessarily mean sadomasochism in a sense that the Marquis de Sade would have used it. It's not literal sadomasochism. It could be literal sadomasochism, a sadist and a masochist in a literal relationship involving all kinds of leather and whatever chains. But for Jean-Paul Sartre, it's emotional sadomasochism that is the key. In many human relationships, to some extent, I wonder if not all, almost all human relationships have a sadomasochistic dimension to them. In some the dimension is big, in others, in good relationships, obviously the dimension is very small, but it might still be there to some extent. It's something to work on. Even somebody you really love, genuinely love, your husband, your wife, your children, somebody you couldn't love more in your life. And yet there's an aspect of it where you are using your child. I mean, I can't think of a higher form of love than a parent's love for a child. It's the most giving type of relationship that human beings really know. More even than spouse, right? You give, and you don't get back, right? And at some point, though, a parent is human and expects something. You expect something because you're a human. And that expectation means that to some extent, you will have some type of a very, very, very minimal sadistic relationship with your child. You might. And it's something you have to work on. It's something we all have to work on. It's eliminating that sadomasochism in order to really see others See an other human being in their otherness, rather than as a piece of bread. By the way, this is in the Torah, this image comes up, for example, when the spies, if you remember the story of the spies, they go out on a reconnaissance mission into the land of Israel. This is when Moses and the people are standing outside the land. They send the spies to the land of Israel. The spies come back with a report, and they say, no, we can't do it, man. We can't do it. They're giants there. We're like grasshoppers. We can't do it. And then Yeshua and Kalev, they say, no, we can do it. We can do it. And they use a very interesting expression. Lachmeinuhem. They are our bread. We can go eat them. We can take them. We can eat them. It sounds like a WWF, like a World Federation wrestling phrase. I can eat you. I can eat you, man. I'm not just going to kill you. I'm not just going to beat you. I'm going to eat you. Right? What does that mean? I'm going to eat you. It means that your existence is irrelevant vis-a-vis me. And it's just a task for me to defeat you and to devour you. Physically, emotionally, whatever. That, of course, all belongs to the problem that Levinas wants to deal with. That is the basic problem, is this totality. This totalizing gesture. Sorry, just give me a sec to find my spot. I didn't mark it well enough. Sorry, it's that's why. It's because it begins at the very last line of page 33. The metaphysical desire does not long to return, for it is a desire for a land not of our birth, for a land foreign to every nature, which has not been our fatherland, and to which we shall never betake ourselves. Does this remind you of anything, by the way? Metaphysical desire is a desire not to return, not to a land of our birth, but for a foreign land. Any resonances in your mind? What do you think?
I mean, it's talking about Gullus then.
Well, okay, good. Yes, actually, I think you're right. But I'm thinking even more as Gullus has a negative connotation, right? Mm-hmm. Galut, exile, tends to have a negative connotation. Here he's giving it a positive spin. He says that metaphysics, right? Metaphysical desire. He's using both the word metaphysics and desire in a quirky way here, right? So I've already mentioned how metaphysics is not to be understood simply in the classical sense of a theory of what is beyond the realm of the physical. But it's metaphysical in the sense of it's beyond nature. It's something that pulls us out of the totalizing effect of living in a body, in nature. And it's a desire that pulls us out of it. And this desire is a positive thing for Levinas. Metaphysical desire is a positive thing. So he says metaphysical desire is not a desire that wishes to return. Later on, he'll actually mention this in a couple places. It's not what the Greeks called a nostos. If you ever heard the word nostos in ancient Greek, is a term that describes the journey of Odysseus, the Odyssey. The Odyssey is a nostos. The word nostos means returning home, going back home. And so the word nostos became, in many languages, including English, the root of the word nostalgia. Nostalgia is a desire to return home. So Levinas is saying that metaphysical desire is not a kind of nostalgia. It's exactly the opposite. It's a desire for adventure. It's a desire to leave home, but not adventure in the sense of I'm going out on an adventure and in the back of my mind I know that I'm coming back home. It's not tourism. Tourism is, I'm going to check out, I've always wanted to go to Peru and see those beautiful ruins of Peru, but I'm not going to go live in Peru. I'm going to come back home. So the adventure is not a real adventure in the sense of a radical adventure where I'm heading out and I'm burning my bridges, never coming back. But that's what metaphysical desire is. Leaving and never looking back. It is without a longing to return, it is a desire for a land not of our birth, to a land foreign to every nature, which has not been our fatherland, and to which we shall never betake ourselves. So what do you think? Can you think of any example in the Torah? I mean, to my mind, just the obvious example jumps out.
I'm thinking of Abraham here, where
Thank you.
God,
I hope it was clear, but I mean, to my mind, it's like, whoa. Right? And I think he has that very much in mind. He often contrasts, in Totality and in Infinity and in other texts, he contrasts Abraham to Odysseus. Odysseus is the guy who leaves his homeland in Ithaca only to return there. After a very, very long and arduous and tortuous journey, he does get back home. And that's the beauty of the story, is that his return back home. That's the beauty. That's what the Odyssey is. The Odyssey is a return back home. Whereas Avram Avinu, the story of Avram Avinu begins with Lech Lecha, go to yourself and never come back. He never comes back home. This, by the way, is my favorite painting of this moment when Avram is leaving. And we are very fortunate to have this beautiful painting by Molnar Yosef here in Budapest. Is a Hungarian painter, and you can find it in the National Gallery. It's a bit of a funny painting because, this presumably is Ishmael and Yitzchak, and they look very much like they're the same age, more or less. But whatever, it's fine. It's a gorgeous painting. So, metaphysical desire takes us out of home, into the unknown. The metaphysical desire does not rest upon any prior kinship. It's a desire that cannot be satisfied. This, as I mentioned yesterday, is a common move among philosophical writers to take language as we know it and to make it do what it's not supposed to do. A desire that cannot be satisfied. What the heck is that? What is a desire that cannot be satisfied? The whole point of a desire is that it can be satisfied. It maybe it won't be satisfied. A person, we know many cases, and I'm sure we ourselves have many desires that can't be satisfied. I want this food. I want to live there. I want that car. I want this person. And, I just can't. I can't achieve it for whatever reason. But in principle, I could. It's possible, it's just that I won't. It's possible to satisfy it, but I'm too poor, too weak, too ugly, whatever, to satisfy it. But to say that a desire that is one that cannot be satisfied, what does that mean then? How is that even a desire anymore? If in principle it can't be satisfied, then shouldn't we call it something else? But Levinas doesn't have another word. Maybe there isn't another word. So that's why he's using the word desire, because he doesn't have a choice. He wants to say that there is such a thing as, and it's a unique desire. It's the only such desire, a desire that will never be satisfied. In principle. No matter how rich, no matter how strong, no matter how wonderful you are, you will never satisfy this desire.
Do you think that never he mind also afterlife? Never.
That's a really good question. I don't know. You know what? I don't know, because he doesn't. We could even ask this question. Remember when we spoke in our first class about eschatology and the way he talks about the hereafter, and I suggested that eschatology is not. He says eschatology is not about what is going to be in the future. It's about what is now, which suggests that it can never be satisfied. So it is possible. I mean, my gut instinct is to say, although he doesn't say this, in nowhere that I remember, he never talks about whether desire is satisfied in the hereafter, in the world to come. I suspect he would say it's not, really. And he's not the first person to think that way. There was a great Danish Christian philosopher named Kierkegaard, who I remember when I first read this, I thought, oh my gosh, what is he? How can he say this? He said, in the world to come, when we die, what is that? Do we all sit around in a spiritual Hawaii, drinking margaritas, on the spiritual beach and enjoying God as if God is the sunshine. Kierkegaard says no. He says the struggles that we had here in this world and the next world are intensified. They're double what we had here. They're higher struggles. There's more struggle in the next world. And it's a shocking and disturbing idea, but in a way, if you think about it, it's a really beautiful idea. And it also makes sense of why we have to struggle here. Because if you think of a simple model, if you train in karate, for example, and you train, you get a white belt, you come in, you train for a few months. After a few months, what happens? You get a yellow belt in karate. What does that mean, a yellow belt? A yellow belt means that now you're in a position to train more in order to get a green belt. What happens when you get a green belt? You train more to get a blue belt, and so on. What happens when you get a black belt? Well, you train more to get a second degree black belt. So every time you have an accomplishment, what is the whole point of an accomplishment, a true accomplishment? Is it that we get paid like a salary so that we can relax now and do nothing? Or is when we have a true accomplishment, which is connected to a true striving, a true effort, generally speaking, those who really love effort, those people who enjoy the effort towards a goal, once they get to a goal, they want more. That's what we want now. We want more effort. We want a higher level challenge. So it could be that this is the model for understanding Levinas. If he doesn't, again, I don't remember. He probably does talk about the next world, but I imagine he imagined that he would think of it as a higher level desire. As much as we desire here, the world to come might be a more intense desire. For Levinas, this isn't a bad thing. On the contrary, it's what makes finite existence so beautiful, so delicious, so joyful, is that we are able to strive beyond finitude towards things that are infinite, and are only, if there's anything sad about our situation as it is, it's that our striving is limited, that our desire is limited by our capacity to desire. So it could be that the more we push ourselves, as it were, the more ethical we become, the more religious we become, the more intense that desire is. So, yeah, I'm trying to think if we could say that angels have a desire too. We generally think of angels as being without desire, beyond desire, but I don't know. Okay, too much speculation here. I have to stick to the text, but it's a really good question. I don't know. This desire cannot be satisfied, for we speak lightly of desires satisfied, or of sexual needs, or even of moral and religious needs. Love itself is thus taken to be a satisfaction of a sublime hunger. If this language is possible, it is because most of our desires and love are not pure. If we can satisfy our desire in love, then that's not really love. It's not a pure love. If love can be satisfied, it's not pure love. It's like hunger. It's like sexual desire. You can only eat so much. You're satisfied. You can only have so much sex. You're satisfied. Fine, but that's not pure desire. Pure desire cannot be satisfied. The desires one can satisfy resemble metaphysical desire only in the deceptions of satisfaction, or in the exasperation of non-satisfaction, and desire which constitutes voluptuosity itself. Great philosophical word. Voluptuosity, right, from the word voluptuous. The metaphysical desire has another intention. It desires beyond everything that can simply complete it. It is like goodness. Funny term to introduce into this at this point, right? Like goodness, the desired does not fulfill it, but deepens it. When something is good, Levinas says, it does not fulfill desire, but it deepens the desire. That's what goodness is. Again, he's using the word goodness in a rather unusual sense, which doesn't mean that it's not a real sense. It could be that Levinas is just the first person to articulate how to use the word good in this way. When I drink some water, I say, wow, it's good, refreshing water, nice cold, right? Have a nice cold beer, that's good. And I feel satisfied by the goodness of that, by the wholesome goodness of that wholesome, crunchy cereal. That is one way to use the word goodness, but it's not goodness in the fuller sense of the word. True goodness, you don't feel satisfied. The desire, rather, is deepened. Now you desire even more than you did. You don't achieve a state of relaxation in relationship to what is good. The tension in relationship to the good is deepened. So, is that a good thing? It sounds like a bad thing. Why are we calling it good? Because we tend to associate the word good with satisfaction, with stopping. I'm going. I'm exhausted. I need to rest. Now, good. I stopped. I'm resting now. Good. This is good. That is one way to use the word goodness, but isn't there another way that good means no? It's not stopping. It's not resting, because after all, just a very simple, obvious example of what's wrong with stopping, boredom tends to settle in as soon as we've stopped. We like to rest because we've done a lot of work and we're tired, but there's only so much rest we can handle. If we have, when people say that they want to, people dream of their ideal vacation or retirement, when you retire, you want to go to, as I mentioned, to Hawaii or the Barbados or the Canary Islands and sit down and have a margarita on the beach. But how many margaritas can you have on the beach? And how long can you sit on the beach? And you can enjoy it for a day, 2, 3, a week, maybe even a month. But a normal human being would go bananas after a month on the beach with one margarita after another. You want to do something. You need to get out there and do something. Even if just getting off the beach and doing something, and even that's not going to be enough. You're going to desire to do something else. So boredom is a good indication of the kind of goodness that Levinas is talking about here. That human beings, when something is really good in human life, it's not something that ends. It's something that is deepened in its desire. And we like that. We enjoy that. That is, in fact, what joy is. Joy is this deepening of desire.
I think there are certain things in there where it's called desire, but you could almost say it might be true, but I feel like it's desire from something rather than desire for something at times, and he's maybe conflating the two. Like, I don't know. To use the example of someone sitting on the beach, I have to imagine it's more a desire to escape from monotony than necessarily something you can ascribe a moral element to.
Okay, it's good. You put your finger on what's wrong with my example. Because it is a desire for adventure, and a desire to get out there is a desire, as you nicely put it, from, which we can't say in English, but let's, right? Desire from. I want to leave this place. I'm tired and bored of it. Definitely it's an aspect, I think, of what Levinas is saying, but I think he was going to want to say that desire, metaphysical desire, is motivated by the object. Object is not the right word, but it's definitely motivated by the other. There's something out there that pulls me, that pulls my desire. So it's not just that I'm tired of this and bored, I'm sick and tired, bored of what I have, but there's something out there that attracts me. That would be more than just, it's funny, when we're bored, sometimes we don't know we're fishing around desperately to find something interesting. We find ourselves in a situation where we ask, well, what should I do now? When real boredom settles in sometimes, when you're overwhelmed with boredom, sometimes you don't know the whole problem that has put you in that state is that you don't find anything interesting. You want to play shesh? No. Want to watch TV? No. You want to eat something? No, I'm full. You want to go out for a walk? No. Right? There's nothing I can say to interest you. That's what total boredom is. Nothing pulls you. So in that sense, I don't think Levinas wants to say that's the motive. Is like, I'm desperately looking for something to do. It's that there really is something out there that is pulling you. And that's why when you find it, and you might find it, and that's from that state of boredom, you might finally come across something. Oh yes, that is exactly what I want to do now. When you find something that you really love, then you can never get enough of it. Just can't get enough. Just can't get enough of this. Can't get enough of you. Right? When somebody's really in love, I can't get enough of you. Can't get enough. Right? What does it mean I can't get enough? The desire is infinite. As much as I've achieved, I want more. Knowledge tends to be like that. That's one beautiful thing about knowledge, I think, is that the more you know, the more you want to know. It's a kind of Faustian desire. The more I've achieved in understanding, now the more I want. Actually, even, money can be like that. A lot of desires can be like that. You can never be people who really love money, who are millionaires and multimillionaires and billionaires and you just can't get enough. I mean, at some point, what are you going to do with all that money? You can never spend it in one lifetime. It doesn't matter. I want to see the zeros growing, right? I don't see those numbers growing, because just the sheer growth of it is exciting. The pure growth, right? So that's infinite desire. That's desire without limit. For Levinas, as I think is already obvious, the only truly meaningful desire of that sort is a desire for another human being or God. Well, he rarely talks about God here. God is always in the background, but there is this infinite pull from the divine, from the direction of the divine, as embodied within the human being. Okay, so let's moving now to the second paragraph now in 34. It is a generosity nourished by the desire, and thus a relationship that is not the disappearance of a distance, not a bringing together. Desire doesn't collapse the distance between myself and the other, or to circumscribe more closely the essence of generosity and of goodness. A relationship whose positivity comes from remoteness, from separation, for it nourishes itself, as one might say, with its hunger. He just told us that hunger, he just spoke of a hunger that is never satisfied. Now he goes full out and gives us a completely paradoxical statement. There is a hunger that nourishes itself from more hunger. Nourishes itself with its hunger. It's not a hunger that is nourished with food. It's a hunger that is nourished with hunger. Hunger itself is its own food. This remoteness is radical only if desire is not the possibility of anticipating the desirable. If it does not think it beforehand, if it goes toward it aimlessly, that is, as toward an absolute, unanticipatable alterity. An alterity, an otherness which cannot be anticipated. As one goes forth unto death. It's like that. He's not saying it is that, but it is like a desire for death, because death is a great example of something that's completely unanticipatable. Desire is absolute if the desiring being is mortal, and the desired, with a capital D, the object of desire, the desideratum, is invisible. Invisibility here does not denote an absence of relation. It implies relations with what is not given, of which there is no idea. Vision is an adequation of the idea with the thing, a comprehension that encompasses. Non-adequation does not denote a simple negation or an obscurity of the idea, but beyond the light and the night, beyond the knowledge-measuring beings, the inordinateness, the unmeasurability, we might say, of desire. Desire is the desire for absolutely other. Why does he use the word invisible here? Again, we have an example of a word which he uses in a funny way, invisible. Although I actually think that his point is very useful in understanding the invisibility of God.
Yeah, it sounds so religious.
Very much, right?
God.
Very much so, right? Yeah, we say God is invisible. When we say God is invisible, right? Why do we say God is invisible? Because in the second item of the Decalogue, of the Aseret Dibrot, the so-called Ten Commandments, God says, effectively, don't make images of me. You can't see me. You can't see me. I'm invisible. Well, simple question. Is God invisible like H.G. Wells' Invisible Man? The invisible man is also invisible. I can imagine, it doesn't take much of a sci-fi imagination to think of something that is like a piece of glass that is so clean that you bump into it. As we know, probably everyone in their lifetimes has run into a window that is just so perfectly clean you don't even know it's there. Right? That's an invisible thing. It's a thing. It's window. It's made out of something, but it's invisible. And likewise, in the realm of the imagination, we can imagine something that's completely invisible. Air is invisible. We know air is there. We'd be dead without it, but it's invisible effectively. So is God invisible in the same way that air is invisible? The terms are used in a way that is similar, but you would think that there has to be something more to God's invisibility than the invisibility of air or of the invisible man. It's invisible in a metaphorical sense. It's not enough to say that God is invisible. Oh, I don't see God. Well, there's lots of things you don't see. Do you see electrons? Do you see, do you see the nearest galaxy? Do you see the edge of the universe? Do you see radio waves? Do you see the waves that are cooking your food in your microwave? You don't see those either. Do you see ultraviolet light? Do you see infrared light? No, there's lots of invisible things. So what's so special about divine invisibility? Levinas suggests a way to think of it. He says the invisible here is not simply something that you cannot see. It's something that you cannot achieve what he calls adequation with. Here he's referring to an old idea, which, it's funny, I mentioned Thomas Aquinas earlier. I have to mention him again because Thomas Aquinas defined truth, veritas, as adequatio re ad intellectus. Intellectum, the Latin is not great. The adequation, making adequate the idea or the thing in reality to the mind. If I have a pair of glasses and I want to know what is the truth about these glasses, so there has to be a relationship where my idea in my mind of the glasses is adequate. Adequate is a funny word in English, but because adequatio means something more like, well, it does mean adequate, but we sometimes translate adequatio as correspondence. It has to correspond. Something between my concept of this pair of glasses and the pair of glasses themselves, the actual pair of glasses, which are not inside my head, they're outside my head. I put them on my head, not in my head. But there is inside my brain and inside my thoughts something like a pair of glasses, not a real pair of glasses, but an idea of a pair of glasses. And somehow that idea is adequate, is similar to and adequate to the pair of glasses outside of my head. And that relationship of adequation is called truth, Thomas Aquinas says. That's what truth is. Truth is there's an adequacy between my thoughts and reality. So Levinas uses this philosophical concept of adequation to define invisibility. He says, when I'm talking about invisibility, I mean that there is no adequation. There is no proper correspondence between my thought and the object. What does that mean? That means I can use the word God, but the word, I can use the word God, and therefore I can think God. I have an idea in my mind of God, of infinity, but that idea is not adequate to what God really is. Or even in mathematics, we can use it because he uses the word infinity, which is we know mostly from mathematics. Infinity is not a word that is restricted to math, but in math we're most familiar with it in math. When we speak about an infinite number, we can say infinity. We can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and keep counting. Keep counting until you're dead, and then keep counting beyond your death. And then we can use a symbol. We can put an 8 sleeping on its side, and we can say, yes, I have a symbol for infinity. When I do math, I can even talk about all kinds of infinities. As you know, in math, there's all kinds of discussions of infinity. But our concept of infinity, our discussions of infinity are never really adequate to the infinite itself. And likewise, our concepts of God are never adequate. It's always an inadequate idea. Whereas my concept of glasses is basically adequate to a pair of glasses. In a deeper sense, of course, I don't understand what a pair of glasses is on a subatomic and subatomic. When I get into the gluons and the quarks, which make up the atoms and go even deeper. So even a pair of glasses becomes an infinitely mysterious thing. But there is, on some level, some adequacy between my thought and the glasses. Whereas with God there isn't. This, by the way, sorry if I didn't make it completely clear enough, all of that, what I just said, is how he's understanding invisibility. Right, so the invisible, God is invisible, not because he cannot be seen like the invisible man, because the invisible man, after all, is a man. It's fantasy, of course, but the invisible man is a human being. It just happens that he's invisible by virtue of some astonishing magical or scientific mechanism, but is still a man. So we have a difficulty understanding how this person is invisible, but we can describe this man. Likewise, air. Air is invisible, but we can understand it. We can have an adequate scientific or chemical understanding of air. But here, the invisibility that he's describing, invisibility means that we don't have an adequate understanding. It is absolutely other. Besides the hunger one satisfies, the thirst one quenches, and the senses one allays, metaphysics desires the other beyond satisfactions, where no gesture by the body to diminish the aspiration is possible, where it is not possible to sketch out any known caress or invent any new caress. There is no caress, no hug has been yet invented which can satisfy this desire, this metaphysical desire for a metaphysical hug. A desire without satisfaction which precisely understands the remoteness, the alterity, the exteriority of the other. For desire, this alterity, not adequate to the idea, has a meaning. It is understood as the alterity of the other and of the Most High. Here, again, is an important biblical term. This term does not exist in philosophy. I mean, it is brought into philosophy, but it is taken from, well, as you might know, the first instance of the word in the Bible is when Abraham meets Melchizedek, and Melchizedek uses this expression, Kel Elyon, El Elyon, the highest God, the Most High. So Levinas says there is such. He's giving us a very negative definition. He's speaking negatively as what the object of this metaphysical desire isn't. So we could say, so Levinas is doing what's called negative theology. This is something that is mostly known in Jewish circles from the Maimonides' Guide of the Perplexed. Where Maimonides says, the best way to describe what God is to tell you what God isn't. So God doesn't have a body, God isn't finite, and so on. And all these negative descriptions of God constitute what's called negative theology. So it seems like Levinas is saying, all I can do is negative theology. All I can tell you is what the object of the desire isn't. But here, he says, no, there are certain words that we can use to tell you what the object is. He's used the word good. Goodness is the object of metaphysical desire. And now he's saying most high. He doesn't say the word God, at least not at this point, but frankly, I don't know how else to understand the most high here without using the word God. The very dimension of height is opened up by metaphysical desire. This height is no longer the heavens, but the invisible in the very elevation of height and its nobility. To die for the invisible, this is metaphysics. To die for the invisible, this is metaphysics. I don't think until Levinas anyone gave such a crazy definition of what metaphysics is. You would never find anything like this in Aristotle or in the medieval discussions of metaphysics or in the post-medieval discussions, right? Metaphysics is a description of what is beyond the physical. It's not to die for the invisible. But this is how Levinas is using the word. And I think he's using the word to describe what the real impulse behind metaphysics is. What is this impulse? It's an impulse to move beyond the physical, to move beyond the finite, to move beyond the total, into the total beyond. Well, if you're making that kind of move into the total beyond, what is that? It's basically death. Which, if you think about it, also explains the impulse or the gesture that we call sacrifice. When we sacrifice anything, but when we sacrifice an animal on an altar, what is that? What is that gesture of sacrifice which defines all religions, basically? Any religion, not Judaism. It's sacrifice is older than Judaism. Even according to Judaism, sacrifice is older than Judaism. Judaism clearly lays this out, right? In the Torah, assuming, of course, that Judaism means the Torah, insofar as it is think of a simple description, insofar as the Torah is a body of laws that begins with Moses, or if you like, let's take it back to Abraham. He has very few mitzvot, Abraham. He only has 3 mitzvot at that point. Let's say that's Judaism. Well, according to the Torah, if we go before Judaism, which is before Abraham, Abraham and Sarah is the earliest possible point of Judaism. We can't say anything before that is Judaism. And yet the Torah tells us there were many generations before Abraham. So if we go back to the very, very beginning, we have the sons of Adam and Eve, Cain and Hevel. The first and only, well, not only, but the first thing we know about them is what do they do? They sacrifice. Abel has this brilliant idea to offer, not Abel, Cain. Cain is the genius, right? Cain is a genius who has this brilliant idea. Wait, I'm a farmer, I have all this vegetable. Maybe I should take some of these vegetables and burn them. Why? Why would you do that? Don't you want to eat them? Of course I want to eat them. It's edible, it's delicious, but I want to burn them. I want to set them up in smoke. And Abel says, wow, that's a brilliant idea. I love that idea. You know what? I'm going to do more. I'm going to take that idea and I'm going to do what the Japanese do. I'm going to improve on that idea. I'm going to take the invention and create an improvement on it. I'm going to take the best, not just any sheep that I have. I'm going to take the very, very best sheep, the one that would have been the most delicious to eat, and I'm going to kill it. I'm going to burn that. Well, why would you do that? That was a potentially delicious lamb chop right there. That would have been so good, that lamb chop. Why would you burn that sheep of all sheep? But this is a human impulse. The sacrifice is a human impulse to move beyond what I have. In fact, think about it. It falls exactly into Levinas's description of metaphysical desire in terms of hunger in particular. Sacrifice according to the Torah, and not just according to the Torah. We know from umpteen studies in ethnology that sacrifice invariably involves the sacrifice of edible products. That is the quintessential sacrifice. Well, maybe the quintessential might be human sacrifice, which in some cultures is also an edible product. But typically a sacrifice is a sacrifice of an animal or of a vegetable, or a libation poured, a wine. In all these cases, we have something that can be eaten. I can eat this. I can drink this wine. I can eat this lamb. I can eat this cow. I can eat this grain and satisfy my desire. But one part of me says, no, don't satisfy that desire to eat this. Why? Because you will not be satisfied. It's not satisfying enough for me to eat this lamb. Yes, I need to eat lamb. I need to eat beef. I need to have a hamburger. I need to eat bread. I need to drink wine. I need to be satisfied. But if that's all there is, if that's all there is to bread, then I'm not completely human. Man does not live by bread alone, as somebody famous said. And by the way, that somebody famous is not Jesus. Right? Jesus is often quoted as saying the man does not live by bread alone. Jesus ripped it right out of Moses and right out of the book of Deuteronomy, where it says clearly, man does not live by bread alone. Right? Bread is not enough. I need to sacrifice bread. I need to put bread on an altar and burn it and completely sacrifice it. Why? Why did you do that? It doesn't satisfy your hunger. It's true. It doesn't satisfy my finite hunger, but it does satisfy my metaphysical hunger, my metaphysical desire, which is a desire to give up, to a desire to deepen my desire, and ultimately that is expressed as Levinas says, it's expressed even in death. It's a desire for death. This becomes a really interesting and complicated issue of how the human being negotiates with this infinite desire, which expresses itself in a desire for death. It'd be interesting to read Freud's take on this, and as his, if you know his analysis of this in Jenseits vom Lustprinzip, and Beyond the Pleasure Principle, he talks about the Todestrieb, the death desire. Or there's also writings by Georges Bataille, which talks about the human desire to die. In any case, it's a complicated psychological issue of how exactly we desire death and how we replace our own death with the death of some other object, like the death of an animal. But I think Levinas is playing into that here, that there is the desire for death, which is a human desire, is one aspect of this metaphysical desire. I don't think it's the only one. I don't think, for example, we can interpret Levinas in a simple way by appealing to Freud or Bataille, but in any case, I think there is a connection. Thoughts on this? I think we should take a break. Yeah, let's take a break here at this point, yeah?
Okay.
Yeah? Any thoughts on this before we take a break?
I'll admit I'm having a little bit of trouble keeping up with it all. It's, I don't know, very dense.
The language? You're having trouble with the language?
Yeah.
Or the ideas as well? Because
I think it is primarily the language. I mean, the ideas I feel like once they're explained, I'm able to follow. But there are times where I don't know. I want to just throttle him and say what you mean.
Yeah, I totally empathize. I do understand, he is trying to articulate things that are inherently paradoxical by the way in the way that we use normal language, as I'm trying to highlight, right? To speak of a hunger that is not satisfied is a paradoxical way of speaking of a hunger. So he, in a way, he has no choice but to speak in paradoxical language. However, I think that he goes even beyond paradox. He does speak in a poetic way. He gets carried away with the poetry, which is generated by the paradox in a way that is kind of excessive. So yeah, it is. I tend, but this is just the literary milieu in which Levinas is writing. All these French guys write like this. If you think this is bad, we try to read some Derrida. Yeah. It's completely incomprehensible, inhospitable, right? And it just why? I don't know.
I think it's something endemic to academic philosophy in general. I don't know. I tried to read Hegel at one point because everyone says you have to, and I'm pretty sure they should just make people in prison do it. I don't know.
Do what? They should read Hegel?
Yeah,
just as a punishment.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, it's true. Stick you in a room with the phenomenology of spirit. Yeah.
Schopenhauer was right about him.
It's true. And Schopenhauer was a good writer. He writes like Kant in a more or less clear way, and Hegel doesn't. Yeah, I don't know why. It's really not necessary to write like that. As the commentators of Hegel show, you can write a more or less lucid commentary on Hegel, like Kogel. Is more enjoyable to read than Hegel because I'm getting something here. Whereas with Hegel, it's not, like with Hegel and some of these guys, with Levinas less, but with Hegel it sounds like he gives himself syntax. He's like, okay, I'm going to write a book using a vocabulary of only 200 words and not more. I'm not going to use anything but 200 words. That's right. Well, why are you doing that, right? In Levinas, you get a different type of challenge, right? I'm going to use lots of words, but I'm going to use them in weird ways and with voluptuosity, right? In a way that you would never think of using the word voluptuous, right? Or desire and so on. Yeah, this is the French. The French thinkers, they're like writing like this. It's sophisticated. It's like French. It's like a pastry. It's a really sophisticated French pastry, right? It's decadent. It's very decadent.